Hey, welcome to Real Life, everybody. So glad to have you, whether you are at our Valencia location, Canyon Country location, or you are watching online. We are wrapping up a 5-part series called Better Together, and we're talking about how there's so many things in our world that divides us, from our political views, sports allegiances, dietary concerns, personality types, anger styles, everything that kind of puts us into different categories and pretty much small subgroups. But we're talking about how the problem with all the division is it can only be solved by bringing us back together, and we truly are better together. In fact, when January rolled around, I bet you were probably thinking about all the goals that you had for your life that were basically individual. There was a diet plan, there was a fitness plan, there was maybe a spending plan. Most of it was based upon what you wanted to do, and maybe the reason why your New Year's resolution didn't continue is because it was just about you. What if we could actually be better together? And so over the past few weeks, we've talked about the solution for me is we. We've talked about how there's a difficulty in understanding each other, and so we have to find a way to look past all of our differences and all of the things that divide us. We've talked about how we have a need to connect with God with this kind of communal idea, not just individually. It's not just me and Jesus. And we've also talked about how community and being together can even bring healing in our life from all of our hurts and our habits and our hang-ups. And if you missed any of our messages over the past few weeks, you can check out all of these at our website, reallifechurch.org, and catch up on all these. But today, I want to wrap it all up with talking about basically what becomes our default when it comes to community and how we need to push beyond that just a little bit. And so in order to get us thinking about that, let me describe to you a scene from my life, and maybe you can relate to this. When I was in high school, my first day in high school, it was met with a little bit of fear and trepidation. And maybe you had the same experience because you had friends in high school, you just didn't know their schedule. And you weren't necessarily sure when they were going to be having lunch and you were going to be having lunch. And in my setting, some of the most tension-filled moments happened in a room like this. And we have this picture here of a cafeteria, of a lunchroom. And maybe you had this experience as well, but I distinctly remember that first day in high school, not knowing where my friends would be and if they would be in that lunch period. I had to go through the cafeteria line, I get my little tray, and they'd have, I don't know, pigs in a blanket or square pizza or whatever it was, and I'd get the food, and I'd turn around, and the whole time I'm just thinking and praying, God, help me see somebody I know. God, help me see somebody I know. And I'd turn around to a sea of tables to figure out where to go. And if your lunchroom was anything like my lunchroom, people sat in packs. And there was typically an athlete's table. And that table was filled with athletes of all different sports or, people that were into weightlifting. And they were usually there and they were either carbo loading for something that was coming up, or they were eating all protein, or they're bench pressing each other or whatever. It was just kind of that particular group of people was together. And I knew I didn't fit there. So I kept on walking. And then there was the cool kids table. And when I was in school, the cool kids table consisted of a lot of people wearing polos, using lint rollers on each other, planning their next party. That was, that's what they were doing. That's what they were talking about. And I knew I didn't fit there. And they would let you know if you didn't fit there. And I kept on walking. Then there was the smart kids table. And these were the kids that were, they were so smart and they had done all their homework for this year. They were working on homework for next year. They were playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's what this table was all about. And I knew I didn't fit there. Oftentimes there's a Christian kids table. And this was a collection of kids from other churches, but it could be a little weird because randomly they break out in the song or do some weird thing with cups and all that. And I thought, I don't want that. And so you just kind of keep walking till you find your people. And for me, it was kind of this, collection of people that didn't have a table. And so we made our own table. And I sat down there, and quickly what became the misfits table or the extras table became my table, and thus not your table. And it was really interesting to me how quickly, once you find your table, how exclusive your table becomes, and how you don't want anybody else at your table, but you desperately want to be part of somebody else's table. Now, the good news is, when we grow up and we get out of school, all that goes away, right? I mean, the reality is you still have a table. You still are searching for your table. And your table might be at the office where you found a group of people in which you have some kind of connection. Your table may be in the neighborhood with a group of people that you hang out with. But most likely, the table that you feel most comfortable with is the table that you've helped create, which is the table of your family. And so when we talk about the need for us to be together and to be in community, our natural default is to say, I got this. I've got my family. I've got plenty of community in my life. So what does that look like for you? For you, your family may look like you're a mom of 3 kids. And your day consists of getting up before the kids, getting them up, getting them ready for school, handing them their homework, handing them their backpacks, their lunches, taking them to school, dropping them off. And then maybe you have the luxury to be able to, volunteer in their classrooms and help out with class parties and run errands for home. And then you pick up the kids and you bring them home and you help them with their homework and you get them fed and you get them, bathed and put to bed. And then you're exhausted and you get ready to do it all again the next day. And if I were to say to you, you need some community in your life, you would say, oh, I got it. It's these 3 kids I'm trying to raise. Maybe you're a family with 2 working parents, and your day consists of where are you going to be, who can take the kids to school, who can pick up, and there's a lot of text messages going back and forth as to who's picking up who and who's doing what, and you're picking up dinner on the way home, and you're bringing it home, and everything about your day is about collecting, your kids from wherever they are, and you try to get into the house and just hunker down. You close the doors, you close the blinds, you sit there and you try to have some family time during, homework and maybe a little bit of television, and then you go to bed. And if I say you need community, you'd say, oh, I got it. It's this little bit of time I have with my family. And the way that you would think about it is, you know what? I've got enough going on. Church, maybe, once in a while. Anything beyond that, a life group, a rooted group, going on a mission trip, don't have time for it. Maybe you're the single parent that you only see your kids every other weekend. And so when you get them, it's a mad dash to fill that time with fun experiences. So they love coming to your house. And you're going to amusement parks, and you're going camping, and you're doing fun outings, and you're doing whatever it takes to be the fun house. And if I say you need community, you'd say, oh, I got it. It's all poured into these kids. Maybe you have aging parents. And you're dealing with them and you're racing over to their house or to wherever they are living and to take care of them and meet their needs. And maybe you're considering them moving them into your house, for their final season of life. And it's an exhausting time. And if I said to you, yeah, we're better together, you need community, you go, I got plenty of that. I don't need any more. You see, the tendency for most of us is now that we've found our table, now that we've found our group of people and it's our family, our community quotient is met. Because we've got our family. Jesus kind of grew up in that kind of a setting. Back then, people kind of not only, raised their family, they would be with other families as well. It was kind of this tribal kind of a feel. And when they would go to Jerusalem for holy days or for sacrifices or the like, they would all migrate together to go to Jerusalem from Bethlehem, from Nazareth, where Jesus was from, and then they would migrate back. And I've always thought one of the funniest stories in the Bible is where Jesus and his family go to Jerusalem. Jesus is about 12 years old at the time, and on the way back, a few days into the journey, they recognize Jesus isn't here. Where is he? And I always thought that was amusing because how do you lose him, right? Has anybody seen the Lord? Where did he go? But the reason that they did this and the reason they wouldn't have known where he was is because they would travel in groups of 3. There would be the women at the front of the line, and then all the kids, and then the men in the back. And so that's the way they would travel to protect themselves against vandals on this very treacherous road between home and Jerusalem. And on the way back from Jerusalem, Joseph was in the back thinking, well, Jesus must be either with the kids or up there with Mary. And Mary's in the front thinking, well, Jesus must be with the kids or back there with Joseph. And about 2 or 3 days into the journey, they see each other and they say, have you seen Jesus? We have not. And then they go and they find him, and it becomes this really interesting story that we learn more about who Jesus really is and who he's beginning to figure out and who he is and just tell that to people. But the whole idea behind this was that they traveled in community. They had their own built-in community. They had their own large table of how they did life together. And this is the way most of us kind of view community, that we should be in this kind of, family oriented. And some of us have that luxury. You've got grandparents that live nearby. You've got aunts and uncles and cousins, and you still go to all the birthday parties and everything. But a lot of us don't. And the only community connection we have is over, a phone call or, through FaceTime or through Skype and just sending text messages and social media. And that's really our only connection. In fact, when Lori and I were married about 8 years is when we had our first child. And we had experienced community up until the birth of our first child, just with friendships and, people we'd hang out with at church and in the neighborhood. When Lindsay came along, it really kind of changed everything, because now suddenly there's a child involved and who's going to be at home and how are we going to do this? And we recognized our parents lived about 10 hours away and we don't really have that kind of family community. We've got to establish our table. We need some more people at this table. And so there was a sweet older couple that lived next door to us that were empty nesters. And we just asked them, hey, would you help out with maybe watching Lindsay once in a while? So Lori was getting ready to go back to work and I was working and there was a little gap of time there. She said, absolutely. And we so valued them in our lives as part of our community. But here was the problem with that. The community only existed to serve us. We began to figure out that that is not true community. When community is only there just to meet your needs, then it's not authentic community. And most of us have gotten into a place where there are people in our life, there are friends in our life, there are people that we say we know, but they're really just a means to an end. Sometimes we need others in our life, not just for our sake, but for their sake. And the reason that Jesus lived in this type of community with these other people was not just because they didn't have cars and planes and automobiles and all of that. It wasn't just because this is the way they migrated together. It was because this is what God had told them to do. Whether you're related or not, this is how I want you to operate together. Take a look at what the Lord had said to them when this community first began. We read about this in Deuteronomy. He says, I want you to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. He says, these words I say to you. I want you to know them, I want you to live them, and I want you to share them with one another. But here's what he's not saying. He's not saying this is only for you and your immediate family. In fact, authors Reggie Joiner and Carrie Nieuwhof say it this way in this amazing book called Parenting Beyond Your Capacity. It reads this way. Moses is speaking to all of Israel about the importance of families passing on their faith to the next generation. He was talking to every parent and everyone else. We assume because there is so much language about family and children that he was talking primarily to parents, but Moses was speaking to all of Israel. The culture of the Israelites was that of community. Not only were parents listening, but there were others in the crowd as well. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, and a wider circle of adults. And the point of this is that the creation of our table shouldn't just be those in our home. It needs to be bigger than that. What this book goes on to say is the principle that is so true for all of us when it comes to community. The issue for us is not just to have people in our life that we're obligated to, not just to have people in our life that are there as an end, as a kind of a means to our end, but rather people that we exist to serve as well. Richard Beck, in one of his works, talks about this idea of a moral circle in which we live. Take a look at this graph here. He talks about this idea of the fully human people in our lives start off with those that are family and friends and that are like family. These are the ones that are in our circle. But then outside of that is kind of our acquaintances and strangers. And then everybody else is basically, we don't even see them as human because they're really not a part of our lives. We don't think about these people that exist on the other side of the world, or maybe on the other side of the street, because we don't even look at them or see them. But here's his point. In order for us to grow in our own capacity, we have to widen the circle to include more than just family, friends, and like family. Now let me just hit the timeout for just a second. Because I think what some of you are thinking right now is, yeah, but I don't trust anybody else. I've been burned before. I've been hurt before. Maybe you've been in a horrific situation where you were abused by somebody that you trusted or your parents trusted. And as a result, it has made you stay away from anybody and everybody that you do not know. And I can only imagine how that must make you so cautious about people around you. But the principle still remains that we need more people in our lives than are just seated at our family dinner table. We need to widen the circle. Can I tell you just a few benefits of this, and then we can talk about how? The first benefit is the value of your family serving others. The value of them serving others. I think about with our family. We always are trying to teach our kids not to be entitled or to, be spoiled or to think it's all about them. But when we decided to take them on a weekend mission getaway to Mexico with our church, that's when it began to click for them. And I remember going on this trip with a bunch of other people from real life, and we're down at this amazing ministry called Yugo Ministries to help out building or putting on a roof on somebody's house. And here we are eating with this family. Here we are, our kids are playing with their kids. And after 2 days of working on this house, when we leave, I look back and my kids are drying tears out of their eyes because they're saying goodbye to new friends that they have widened the circle for to be part of our family. And it changed the way they view things. I think about an instance several years ago. We were at Universal Studios, and it was one of those days that was like 110 degrees and tons of humidity, and it was awful. And everybody, in the park seems to be out to get me. They're all cutting in front of me, and they're all, taking my place in line, and they're all too close to me, and I'm just bothered the whole morning, right? The lines are too long, the place is too expensive, and I'm just bitter. And my wife says, I think it's time to get you inside for some air conditioning. And so we go in to sit down to have lunch, and then I'm complaining about the menu and the prices and all that. And then my wife says something that changed our entire day. She said, why don't we pay for somebody else's meal too? And I look over and I see a guy sitting by himself, and I said, how about him? And she goes, no, how about that family over there? And my kids immediately, oh yeah, Dad, let's do that. Okay. And so we anonymously pay for their meal. Our server comes over after we'd arranged all this, and they said, you wouldn't believe how overwhelmed they were by this. The mom started to cry. Can I just tell you how much that changed the rest of my day? Because we had done something for somebody else. The rest of my day, I didn't really think about who was cutting me off or how long the line was or who was bothering me. It became even easier to say, oh, you go ahead. You want a water bottle? You get a water bottle. You get a water bottle. Because everything was about others. There's such value in serving others. And you want your family to experience that. A second value that is true for all of us is the value of others serving your family. And the reality is you need some people in your life that are saying the same thing to your kids that you're saying to them. In fact, George Barna, who does all kinds of different surveys and stats, came up with this data that found that if children have one other adult in their life saying the same thing about faith and values as their parents are, they're more likely to not only believe it, but to follow it the rest of their lives. I think about years ago when my kids were much younger. My wife met somebody on Facebook that we went back a long time ago with, back to our Kentucky days, and we didn't really know each other then, but they were moving here, and she said, let's have them over for dinner. I said, okay, that sounds great. They came over for dinner, and we had a great time. Their kids are about our kids' age, and we kind of hit it off, and it was good. And then she said, let's have them over next Friday night too. And I said, no, hang on. Okay, these are our Fridays now. We can't just book them all up. She goes, let's do it again. Okay, let's have them over. And then the next week they invited us over, and the next week we invited them over. And I said, Lori, are you serious? Are we really going to do this every Friday? And she said, if we're going to have lifelong friends and have community, then we've got to make an effort to do it. And here are these two introverts deciding to book up our Fridays with these new friends. You fast forward years of Friday nights. And these people have become some of our closest friends to the point where they are able to speak words of truth into my kids' life that my kids hear differently from them, but it's the same message that we've been saying. There's such value in that. And I know you want that value in your life. I know you want that value in serving others. So how do we do that? Well, it basically comes down to this. We need to add chairs to the table. The value in serving others and others serving us is we have to widen that moral circle in our life and add chairs to the table. I think about this in relationship to this couple that we met. We became friends and we started a life group, and then the church contacted us and said, we've got another couple we want to send to you. And even though our life group is full, we thought, yep, we'll add them, let's bring them on. And they came on and started coming to life group, and the husband quickly let us know that he had a lot of questions about God, might be an atheist, wasn't all that sure about the whole thing, but we said, come on. His daughter was our daughter's age, and so they kind of hit it off, and he kept coming, and he started asking us questions, and over a period of time, his faith just began to grow. And then one weekend, we were going to have baptisms around here, and I just shot him an email. I said, hey, baptisms are coming up. Are you ready? And he wrote back and he said, you know what? It's so surprising that you asked, because I was actually just starting to think about this. I'm in. And I had the privilege to baptize him and see their faith begin to grow and flourish, all within the context of this life group. And it really came down to, would we add any more chairs? Would we invite anybody else in to what we'd already been doing? So here's my suggestion for you. Don't just be content with saying, I have a spouse, or I have a couple of friends, or I have a couple of kids, and that's my community. Widen the circle to care more about just those already at your table. Can I show you a few things that might help out? Here they are. The first one is this: a come and go dinner. Put a flyer out to your neighbors and say, hey, we're having taco salad at our house from 6 to 8 on whatever night it is. Come and go as you please. You can stay the whole time, or you can just come and get food and leave. But just open it up to your neighbors. See who you meet. Here's the second thing, and we talk about this a lot around here. Go to First Step here at Real Life. Whether it's at Canyon Country or whether it's at Valencia, choose to check that out, because that gives you an opportunity to meet other people and take your first step into Rooted, which will get you into a community of people and then a life group. Don't do life on your own. But then there's a third idea, which we talk about a lot around here as well, and it's what's called one more, which is your way of saying there's room for one more at our table. And you begin to participate in the foster care services in our community. There are some people in our community that have said, we're fully bought into this and we want to bring in a foster child into our home, whether it's for a few weeks or a few years. But then there are some that have said, you know what, we can't really do that right now, but here's the way we're going to add chairs to our table. We're going to help you take care of that child by providing you resources, or praying for you, supporting you, helping out when you can't be there with your child, but also to work with an organization here in town to facilitate the needs of social workers who step in and help out with foster kids in our community. There are so many different ways you can add chairs to that table whether it's physically in your home or at somebody else's table, but now they're part of your family. Friends, better together isn't just an idea where we say, yeah, that would be nice someday. It's something that can happen today. And it is something that's been happening for people in our church for many years. And specifically when it comes to taking in kids who need a home. When you choose to add chairs to the table, it changes the family that normally sits at that table. Take a look at this.
Josh, what are you doing? Josh. Josh. We're leaving, aren't we? Where are we going? Josh, where are we going?
I don't know.
We're not going together?
I don't know.
Stability is lacking. Where am I going to go to school? Where am I going to live? They feel that they don't have a voice because, unfortunately, they can't even stay in their own community. There were 8,500 children removed from their families last year. Of that, 339 right here in Santa Clarita. Only 7% of those children were able to remain in this valley.
I need a placement for Jason and Josh. Yeah, 15 and 17. They called yesterday. I know. Me too. They just can't seem to find their place, you know? Okay. Let me know who you find. No. They shut that home down. Yeah. New rules. Okay. Thanks.
Going to a new school, new social environment. And if they're not part of a friend group, if they're not part of a social group, then they have to now go and be in a new environment, new customs, new food, new bedtime practice. Are they gonna like me? Are they gonna love me? Maybe they have a different definition of love. How long are they gonna keep me?
Okay, here are your schedules. Go. Look, here is your class and the classroom and the time, okay? Okay.
So, when's lunch?
Well, for you, lunch is going to be 11:34, and your lunch, Joshua, is going to be 12:04, okay?
So we don't even have lunch together?
We'll be fine, come on.
They need unconditional love. Loving these children as if they were my own children. Christ loved the church. The church has a spiritual, let alone a moral responsibility to take care of the children. There's a calling, there's an urgency.
So this brings us to age ranges, and there's several thoughts on this. You do not want to disrupt the birth order, and by that it means if you have a child that is 8, you would not want to take in a child over the age of 8.
And if it's tugging, then we need to act upon it, whether it's adopting a social worker, whether it's filling up a bag, because the church has provided all the bags when there's newly detained, and even when children need clothes. doing CASA, which is a court-appointed special advocate, being a mentor, being a resource parent. These are all ways. And then, of course, above all, is prayer, because the Lord will move on hearts and minds of men.
Okay. 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 Oh, today. Oh, today. That quickly. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye. We'll see you later. Today.
We need more resource homes. I mean, it's a process, but the joy that you get to help this child and further develop their social skills and their development, their cognizance, that joy alone, that should have people just lining up to be a resource parent.
Last move. Right, boys? Oh, you guys are so lucky. No one takes teenagers, let alone two. Don't screw it up. All right, let's meet your new family.
Come on, Josh. Let's go.